Going back to a game I tried a while ago, let's play a session of this or that. I'll present two options in a given category, and in the comments section, you, the viewer, can state which option you prefer. Now, some may roll their eyes at this type of game due to the lack of freedom. Basically, some may look at these choices and think, I don't like or care about either of those options. I want option C or this option that's not presented. Well, that's true. Freedom is nice, but sometimes it is interesting to see the choices we make when our options are limited, when we cannot choose whatever we want. So, with that, let's begin. This session will consist of four categories. Category 1, changes to the overall game. Option 1, increasing the life point count from 8,000 to 12,000, and obviously banning Ancient Leaf. Or option 2, unlimited extra deck, but every card over 15 leads to a reduction in starting life points by 500. In option 1, the game sees a dramatic reduction in the ability to OTK, forcing the game into a slower and more tactical state for dumping everything onto the board at once on turn 1 becomes a less optimal strategy in most situations because now your opponent can, in a sense, be more flexible in biding their time to create the ability to break your board, and now suddenly you're out of resources. However, the obvious drawback to this option is that the game will become longer, with the increased probability of game freeze will go to time and be decided by life points, something that some people may not prefer. In option 2, deck building becomes a little more interesting and strategic with the possible expansion of the extra deck, especially with the arrival of link summoning, placing more strain of sorts on extra deck space because now you have an entirely new type of monster to put in the extra deck, and the overall resultant versatility of the extra deck following that strain. This increased versatility, though, should come at a cost. There are a number of times where during deck design, a player laments not having one or two, maybe even three more extra deck spots. It would be interesting to see how many players would trade in those life points for that extra space. Category 2, removing cards from the ban list. This choice is rather simple. Are you the type of player that prefers the ban list returns cards for semi-competitive decks, Tier 2, Tier 2.5 crowd, or returns cards for lower tier decks and more generic cards that have fallen out of favor in the meta? Basically, do you prefer the return of cards that have a higher probability of having an immediate impact on the meta, or returning cards where competitiveness is not the primary issue? An example of the difference is seen here between the two possible choices. Option 1, clearly these cards have a higher probability of having an impact on the meta right away, where option 2, not so much. Now, of course, this is a choice where one might suggest, why do I have to choose? It's not like there's a limit to the number of cards that can come off the ban list. Yes, that is true, but choosing is the point of this game. So, which one do you prefer? Category 3, emergency erratas. In their purest form, erratas are supposed to be nothing but changes in the card text to clarify the effect of the card, but not actually change the effect of the card. However, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has certainly seen its fair share of card effect changes via erratas in the past. With that said, should a card like Struggling Battle receive an emergency errata, changing the effect from the end of either player's battle phase to only the end of the opponent's battle phase. While any argument for or against changing the effect of Struggling Battle and the overall quote unquote brokenness of Struggling Battle is largely supported or challenged via online play, the release of Circuit Breaker has not been nearly long enough in the OCG to see any actual in-game evidence. One must acknowledge the game-breaking potential of Struggling Battle is largely predicated on the ability to activate it during your turn, your battle phase, and receive its effect at almost no real cost, especially on the first turn of the player going second. So again, the question, should Struggling Battle be emergency errataed? And I guess in general, should Konami be more aggressive with applying effect-changing erratas to cards that were clearly underestimated in how they affect the meta? Or should the game continue as such, where Konami uses the ban list to control potential unbalanced threats to the game and only errata cards in very rare circumstances? Category 4, finishing an unfinished archetype. Option 1, Aqua Actresses. Option 2, Felgrand. The Aqua Actress archetype only consists of 7 direct cards of support, with some level of coordination support with Aqua monsters. Right now, their characteristics are similar to a blank slate because all 3 of their monsters do have searching and or summoning assistance effect, but the archetype in general has no continuity or continuality in their effects. They don't have that shtick or niche that most archetypes do, where almost all the cards or almost all the monsters have one similar characteristic that binds them together beyond their name. Depending on what this commonality could become if more support is fleshed out for Aqua Actresses, they could definitely become a valid threat in the meta when considering their current support. With regards to Felgrand, obviously one could object the inclusion of the Felgrand archetype as an option for quote unquote finishing the archetype because it can interlace itself with high level dragons, especially blue eyes for deck design. Therefore, finishing the fleshing out of sorts of Felgrand is kind of pointless. But when standing on its own, Felgrand only has 5 cards to its name, one being the original Felgrand Dragon, which is rather bland at the moment, with the commonly unfulfilled potential and the effects associated with both Guardian and Paladin. New support for the Felgrand archetype could definitely create a fun and rather interesting archetype on the competitive stage that could stand on its own with the occasional tech dragon, rather than the Felgrand cards themselves largely being relegated to tech standing. Well, that concludes this session of This or That. Thank you for your attention and your time. I'm out.